We lived in West Hollywood. West Hollywood is the gayest place on earth, rainbow crosswalks and the whole thing. And to me, I would see these guys that were, 65, 70 years old, that all they had basically was that they worked out, they spray tanned and got hair plugs, they had their little dogs, and they partied on the weekends and probably chased the same sexual escapades that they were chasing 40 years ago.
Right,
and
so
it's not a
sustained
life.
adolescence.
And it's not a full life. And I actually, it's like, I have like almost like a visceral feeling when I talk about it, because I know that could have been me. So when I see these people that either at this point are against gay marriage, but in general, there don't seem to be that many voices publicly about that anymore.
So here's a rough question. So do you think both the flamboyance, now I want to get into this in some detail, but the flamboyance that's been historically associated with the male homosexual community, sorry about that, and the promiscuity, to what degree do you think that both of those are a consequence of not having a more integrated and conservative path potentially open in front of people? So on the feminine side, let's say, you think you have the nurturance angle well covered. You talked to me a little bit about having women around in your infant and child's life as well.
So David's mom is going to be living with us for a few months at the start, as well as his sister, who's taken care of young babies already. But now I understand that they're not the biological mother, but they will be there. We're going to have night nurses also for a few months to help the babies get on a normal sleep schedule. But these are all the pieces that we're trying to put together. But can we just back up for 1 second? Because I think before we go too deep into just the parental part of this, there was another thing that came up when we sort of roughly sketched out this conversation over dinner that I think is important, which is that if you weren't to allow gay people to either get married and enter relationships that will last the test of time or have children to really last the generations, then what are we reducing these people to? And I think that's a huge part of this for me, that I think had the world not shifted to be a little bit kinder, had I not maybe been on tour with you and come to some of these realizations or found someone in the world that I wanted to put their needs above my own, that I could have been left to a life that would have been sort of purely narcissistic or self-destructive or anything. I used to live
I don't see how that, in some sense, I don't see how that can be, there can be any alternative to that if there isn't another pathway forward. Right?
Yes. So, and so to me, that's like the unknown road that I'm going down right now, that I'm choosing to go down that unknown road of, it can be better than that. Right. As I said, we have 2 or 3 couples that are gay parents that are doing some version of this, but we don't have that model. But then when, we lived in West Hollywood is the gayest place on earth, rainbow crosswalks and the whole thing. And to me, I would see these guys that were, 65, 70 years old, that all they had basically was that they worked out, they spray tanned and got hair plugs, they had their little dogs, and they partied on the weekends and probably chased the same sexual escapades that they were chasing 40 years ago.
Right,
and
so
it's not a
sustained
life.
Adolescence.
And it's not a full life. And I actually, it's like, I have like almost like a visceral feeling when I talk about it, because I know that could have been me. So when I see these people that either at this point are against gay marriage, but in general, there don't seem to be that many voices publicly about that anymore.
So here's a rough question. So do you think both the flamboyance, now, I want to get into this in some detail, but the flamboyance that's been historically associated with the male homosexual community, sorry about that, and the promiscuity, to what degree do you think that both of those are a consequence of not having a more integrated and conservative path potentially open in front of people?
I think it's a huge amount that probably will never be fully explained. If people don't have an ability, look, what was the gay rights movement for in the 70s in New York City and Stonewall and all of those things? It was these people just wanted to be able to get married. That was part of it. But it was also that they wanted to be able to go to a bar that wasn't underground, that wasn't hidden, that wasn't, this seedy thing. But that's what they had to do because they were getting raided by the police. And this was going on, obviously, in other countries, and it was going on for decades before that. But they wanted some sense of normalcy. If you don't leave people some little seeds of normalcy, then they will do all sorts of things. So the flamboyant part, there's two parts you're asking about. So the flamboyant part, I'm just not built that way. I'm not. Sometimes I used to, when I was first sort of coming out or coming to grips with myself, I actually liked guys that were kind of flamboyant because to me, it was like, oh, they're so who they are. Like they had just let go of every sort of normal cliche or something like that. They're so who they are.
You saw in that a kind of existential courage.
Yeah. And yet they always really generally gays, they like straight acting. That's a real thing with gays. They like straight acting. So guys always liked me because I didn't seem gay, whatever that meant. And I thought it sort of meant that I was broken in a weird way because it made me feel like a sort of like double freak in an odd sense. Right. Because I was struggling.
Too queer for the straight community and too straight for the queer community.
Well said, man. And so I was sort of grappling with that. So there's the flamboyant part, and then you're asking about the sex side of it. It's like if you don't leave people with some ability to say, oh, you can be in a lasting relationship. This is why marriage equality was so important. Now, this is a sidebar, but I would never force a church or a mosque or a synagogue to perform a wedding that it was against its beliefs. But from a secular perspective, to whatever respect we remain secular in this country, if you don't give people the same opportunity to be in a relationship and then learn all of the things that you talked about before, how you go through that churning with your partner and hopefully make each other better and sometimes make each other worse and all that stuff, what will you leave them with? You will leave them with their carnal desires. And I definitely could have gone down that road. And I definitely did go down that road for a part.
With a defiant rebelliousness, right? Because who knows what happens if you're not allowed, so to speak, to be who you are, then it strikes me as highly probable that an excessive amount of rebelliousness is going to start to look attractive, right? And maybe to be indistinguishable from courage. I would say it's got to be the case that the hope, so to speak, of the more enlightened conservative types who were willing to open the door to gay marriage was that by bringing those relationships inside the traditional fold, that things would normalize, right?
Yeah.
And that there would be a promotion of something like stable, mature, responsible, long-term monogamy.
Well, I think maybe I'm trying to prove that.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to prove it like I'm setting out to prove it, but I suppose de facto, because of my life, I'm trying to prove that. I mean, in a weird way, although I'm probably the unlikeliest of conservatives in that sense, it's like, what life am I trying to live? I'm trying to live a life that is somewhat conservative in nature, in that sense, meaning that I believe that family is important and probably the most important thing after the individual. That's how societies are built. I fundamentally believe that. So it's weird. It's like my worldview, because otherwise, what are you saying to people? So, okay, you're gay, so you can either just endlessly have sex or endlessly disregard every norm known to man and just have nothing other than wake up and just live life how you want. What other way is there to integrate into society? To really integrate into society? I mean, to me, this is it. If you'd like to see more honest and insightful conversations with Jordan Peterson himself, check out our Jordan Peterson playlist, which includes every interview I've ever done with him. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist. Both are right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.